author of the brand new book, A Passion for Leadership, Lessons on Change and Reform from 50 years of public service. Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates is with us. Mr. Secretary, it's an honor to have you. How are you? Good to see you again.
Thank you.
You said the U.S. got out-negotiated on the Iran deal originally. You seem to back off it, though, in a recent interview.
Well, I think they did get out negotiated. For example, the administration said as late as last April, that they had to have anywhere, anytime inspections, and yet that was given up. We insisted for a long time on getting the history of the Iranian nuclear weaponizations research program, and we didn't get that. So I think that there were some things. I think it's clear that we wanted the agreement more than the Iranians.
That's never a good position to negotiate.
And that's never a good position to negotiate in. But I think as you think about the conversations you've been having, the real issue, it seems to me, as the Iranians get $150 billion, is the absence of a strategy of pushback from the administration to parallel this nuclear deal. Where is the strategy on how we are going to invest money, the weapons we are prepared to provide to our allies and friends in the region? What are we prepared to do in terms of military presence, covert action, diplomacy, and so on, to push back consistently against the Iranians' use of this money to interfere elsewhere in the region?
Yeah, well, your first chapter in your book is why bureaucrats so often fail us. And to me, it ought to be a prerequisite that if you're negotiating with a country and they're simultaneously, during negotiations, burning your flag, burning the closest ally's flag, chanting death to your country, and threatening to wipe your allies' country off the face of the earth, that maybe that ought to be a prerequisite to negotiations, but it wasn't. Why?
What we have to do is to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We negotiated with the Soviet Union under President Reagan, but at the same time we were undergoing a major military buildup, and we were resisting them around the world in a variety of places, all of the meddling and interference they were trying to do. So you have to signal, if you want to limit nuclear weapons, that's one thing, but you also have to show that you're prepared to deal with their actions outside of the nuclear arena, wherever they occur.
And this president did not do that. You have a very unique perspective, because you served under George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Tell me the difference. I am obviously a very strong critic of this president. I think he projects weakness. I think that without America's leadership on the world stage, I think you see the world in more chaos and decline. I think the world needs America's strength. He seems to look at American strength as somewhat of a negative. Tell me the difference between the two. Bring me into the mind of the Barack Obama you knew.
Well, I think that, first of all, I have had two concerns that I've written about. One is that he seems to be unwilling to trust subordinates to execute his policies. And so he's centralized operational activities in the White House. So under previous administrations that I worked for, there might be 40 or 50 professionals on the National Security Council staff. There are now hundreds. And I once asked the National Security Advisor, how many people do you have working on Iraq and Afghanistan? He said 25. That was half the size of the Scowcroft NSC, half the size of George W. Bush's, or about less than a fraction of, I mean, it's many times the size of the NSC under George W. Bush. So this micromanagement out of the White House was one concern. The other concern is execution, of being able to make a decision or articulate a vision and then execute it in policy. And a perfect example is the Cairo speech that he gave early in the administration about here's what we were going to do in the Middle East and so on. Led to a lot of euphoria, and then nothing. There was no strategy, there was no implementation, and the result was bitterness in the Middle East because it was just seen as hollow rhetoric.
Well, and later he was also supporting Mohammed Morsi, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, a guy that once referred to the Israelis as descendants of apes and pigs. Let me ask you this question. I am livid that after Vietnam, we pull out 58,000 Americans died there. We'd lost nearly 5,000 lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then this president pulls out early, and Mosul and Tikrit and Fallujah and Ramadi end up in the hands of ISIS. It seems to me if we are going to ask American men and women to risk their lives and shed their blood and lose their limbs, that we ought to define victory. We keep allowing politics to be seen through the, we keep allowing war to be seen through the prism of politics. And if I'm the mother or father of a kid that lost their lives in one of those cities, I'm saying, why? Do we need to change how we approach war in this country?
I think we do, and I think we need to, first of all, be much more careful about when we use military force and then use it overwhelmingly. And you know, we've really only won one war since World War II, and that was the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
And that was because President Bush Sr. articulated specific objectives, accomplished those objectives, and quit.
Are we close to the time where technology, where we're not going to have to send young men door to door like we did in Iraq, that we can fight and win wars with technology and not send these guys on the ground like we had to in Iraq?
No, I don't think we are.
You don't think we're going to get there?
We will have tools that they can use. But this is why presidents have to be so careful about going to war, because it always, at the end of the day, General Stilwell in World War II once said that no matter how a war starts, it always ends up in mud, and that means foot soldiers.
Will we see more hostages as a result of this deal?
Well, I don't know. It's certainly a risk.
All right. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. Thank you for your service for all these years. Appreciate it.
Thank you.